Alright, let's call this meeting to order then, and rise for pledge.
I gotta go sign
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Bray is excused tonight. Mrs. Brimmer?
Here.
Mr. Conley? Here. Mr. Hall is out fishing.
Mr. Hall would ask that you excuse him because he is not present.
Oh.
Mr. McGrath? Here. Mr. Nixon? Here. Mrs. Reese?
Here.
Mr. Owens? Rebecca is also out sick tonight, so Mr. Womack asked that we speak slowly, so since he's doing double duty.
Oh.
Mr. Johnson is here as well. We take a look at our minutes from our August 21st meeting, and that was kind of a special meeting. We moved it back a week, but needs to approve the minutes from that meeting. Motion to approve.
Second.
So is that Nixon and
Nixon and Brimmer.
No, that was
No.
McGrath.
Oh, sorry, McGrath. Sorry. Then the voice came from this side.
Do we have to just yell our last name?
No.
That one? Maybe it will.
Anything we need to change or address on this that you see? Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, no? Motion carried, thank you. All right, and then for our agenda this evening, we need a motion to approve that.
I move to approve the agenda.
Anything that you see, okay, Conley, Grace, anything on there that we need to tweak? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carried, thank you. Public comments, if you would like to talk to us, we'd love to hear from you. This is your big moment.
May I?
You may.
Rose Powell, Cedar Springs. I was just reviewing this map, and at some points the yellow is a little bit hard to distinguish, but I'm looking at the very north end of the Pilgrim Run development, where it's a very dark red, or yellow, sorry.
Do you have this, the small size, or you have a little bit bigger one?
Heaven.
Okay, I was gonna say, the bigger one's a little bit easier to see, so.
Okay. So way on the north end of the Pilgrim Run, it appears to be a multiple family residential. Is that correct? Does that mean multiple family in one home or apartment type? Multiple families?
if you're asking a question, it's a specific designation under the zoning ordinance. So
Okay.
whatever would be permitted for that district.
Okay. So then there's a paler yellow, which is single and two-family residence. So, maybe I can't ask this question right now, but does that mean in that darker yellow area, maybe Mr. Johnson could help me with that, does that mean that could be multiple family residential as in like apartments or townhouses?
We had to consult our use table.
Okay.
Multiple family dwellings are allowed in the RFK zone, yes.
Okay.
Family dwellings, yes.
So, and a multiple family dwelling is a dwelling where it has more than one family's or apartments in it or something?
Apartment is a good term to use, yes.
Okay, so isn't that area already developed? No, that's still
They are developing it right now.
they're developing it. So is there plans to put apartments or townhouses in there? No? Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think they're all homes.
Homes, okay, but that is allowable.
Single-family homes are allowed in that zone as are multiple family units.
Ms. Powell, are you referring to the Prairie Run North development?
Yeah, the north is north. Most north, thank you, Renee, that it appears to be developed, but I thought that those were all single-family homes.
They are, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. But they can, it is zoned to put in apartments or townhomes.
According to this map, it is.
Okay, according to this map. So I guess that's what I was wondering. I was just kind of surprised about that. I thought that was single-family residential.
Both uses are allowed.
Okay,
Both single-family houses and apartments are allowed in the R3 zone.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Number 7 on our agenda, any conflicts of interest or ex parte communication that may be shared?
I did talk to the assessor asking how changes in these would affect the properties. That's all.
All right, we have no scheduled public hearings tonight, so we'll move on to our new business. The updated zoning map is on page 7. If you're in your packet or else, we have these permanent copies of the ones on there. And as you can see, this is, I think, about as up to date as we have it with, even the Holiday Inn Express that we approved. So, anybody see anything on there that's still you're uncertain on or questioning? Yeah.
Right, number 11, it doesn't have an 11 beside it. I didn't know if you wanted it there. It's next to 10. Just no number there is all.
It's near the 11 over there.
Not on this one.
It's right there, right on the yellow line.
Where are you at?
Right here.
Yeah, it's kind of intermixed with the line to the south.
Okay. I think the library is shown in 2 different places. Where the old feature. Library on Cherry and the library up on Maple. You get that one right?
Yeah.
I can hardly see that. Yes, so the old location of the library is still
Oh, yeah.
marked.
Yep.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the building is next to number 10 then.
Dollar Tree, Dollar whatever that was. That's what that would be. That's what it used to be right there.
Okay.
This doesn't have a number on it, but
No, it doesn't have Dollar Tree listed. Or is that whole? I couldn't put them all on.
Well, it definitely looks like they're all numbered, except for that one. And it is not in the list.
So I didn't know whether you intended to list it or just nothing.
yeah, that is. So that is the only building in there, I think, that's not.
Choice or choice one.
in that zone.
They're right next to Reading.
Yeah, over outside, I think. I don't think they're in that.
I'm not sure that this is specifically intended to be a business promotion map, so much as it's giving you a general idea of where things are.
Sure.
So I don't think it's necessary or important for us to list every business.
It's kind of unusual to find a list of businesses on a zoning map. Usually it's just, the purpose is to tell you what the property is zoned. I mean, it's okay to have that, it's just informational. But as businesses go out, then you have an inaccurate map when the major purpose is to show that the most up-to-date zoning of property is really the most important piece of information to convey. So,
We should put them in just so that we would have some idea anywhere.
well, that's how the previous zoning map from 2008 had that in there, and Regis prepared it then, they prepared it now, so they just updated it in the same manner.
Okay.
And so if you want to keep those buildings on there, like I say, it's just informational, but it could change tomorrow when those businesses went out. So, for what that's worth. But I think at the very least, we would want to put under the green box, just put revised October 2018 as the most recent update.
So now, I have a question. Where Rollins is, by 3rd and 4th Street there, Rollins bought that land between himself and 3rd, quite a bit of that. And that is still marked as single family, I believe. If he wants to develop that sometime, is it going to be up to us to have to change it then, or should we ask him, do we need to change it now and mark it as like the B2 district for him now, since he owns it as a business person?
Well, it's perfectly acceptable for a business person to own R1 land, he just doesn't have the ability to develop it for business purposes. Now, I'm not opposed if this is something you guys want to make as part of discussion of proposed changes. I was at least under the impression, Mr. Owens, that you intended this was a discussion regarding the updated map to make sure that we were okay with it.
Yeah, I don't think we are making decisions on changing designations.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to it. It's probably a good idea based on the fact that it's real estate along Muskegon Road. But I'm sure Mr. Johnson will be telling us what we would have to do for all the properties that might be proposed for change.
Just a question, I didn't.
The map that's being presented this evening is based on research that has been updated from the last map, which was 2008 or 2007, so that's quite a period of time. And that map didn't have any zoning, didn't have any property lines on it. So when this map was drawn with property lines on it, there's two assumptions. One, that it's accurate, that the zoning lines on this map match the zoning lines on the new map. Or the other assumption is it may not. And the only way to be sure that this is the official zoning map is to re-adopt it. So if there's any question that the zoning on this map isn't 100% follows the last zoning map, then it should be re-adopted, and that keeps you in the ballgame in terms of a perfectly legal document that you're saying that this is the zoning map with all these property lines on there. So I don't, Rebecca did all the research on it. My advice on these kind of things, when you wait this long and you re-adopt the map with property lines from one that didn't, just to be sure, you may want to go through the public hearing process. And just have the public hearing at the planning commission level, advertise in the newspaper, and the council then re-adopts it as the official zoning map. Then there's no question that this is the zoning map, and nobody can go back and say, well, you redrew it wrong.
Yeah, I should state that I suspect that that's our intention, so.
Right, that's good. I think that's just a good way to proceed so that there's never any question that you're working with an accurate map.
I wasn't exactly clear on what we were doing with it tonight.
My apologies. So just a little after the fact, but yeah, so this is the updated map that the city clerk took all of the motions, changes, 425 agreements since 2007, or whenever the last map was adopted. And she has presented it to you as an update, but it's a draft update. So you see what she believes is her understanding based on all the motions and planning commission actions over the last decade, what the map would look like today. Now, as Mr. Johnson indicated, to be above board, and it's my intention to do so, to eventually hold a public hearing so that this can be adopted as an ordinance by the city council with your recommendation. But I figured while we were doing that, we could talk about potential changes, or, as Mr. Johnson indicated, the last map wasn't as accurate as I think this map might be. So there might be some boundary discussions about where the zoning actually is. But I think that's part of why we want to discuss it, and then eventually hold a public hearing for adoption.
So, why don't we then just kind of, unless you spot anything else on this map, let's move to that second new business item, then the list that Mr. Womack put together for us of the proposed changes, because then we'll so designate that on this map, and then we're moving a step closer towards having that public hearing. So, I guess why don't we just start with it, if there's anything on here that you see that stands out to you as probably not appropriate. I mean, I think that the rationale that Mr. Womack gave on almost all of these. The only question that I had was, I was asking this earlier, I guess it's not on your changes, but just looking at this thing, for the Brook and for Green Acres both, I'm trying to remember, did we, because I remember there being some discussion when we were approving site plans about the zone that they were in. Did they, like, we passed it, you know, there were some things that they wanted that we said you can't have because of the zoning that's there now, and so.
Now, of course, I wasn't here for the Green Acres.
Right.
I understand that that's probably the B1 district. But when the Brook came on board, according to our 425 agreement with Solon Township, they can request a change in the zoning at that time. And it's my understanding that the Planning Commission agreed to, I think, B3 designation for the Brook.
So it was Solon Township that made that request to us.
Well, in conjunction with the Brook themselves.
Right, okay. I couldn't remember, I remember there being some discussion about, you know, what exactly we were going to designate that part, and I didn't remember how that ball got rolling to start with.
And of course, I was not here for the Green Acres. And like Mr. Johnson, I probably have to look at the table of uses, but I'm not sure that use is permitted there unless it's a special land use.
Yeah, it's an AFC large group home that's allowed in the B1 zone by special use.
Yeah, and I think we did have a special land use hearing on that, so. But I think, you know, your proposal here to move it to B2 or B3, I think makes sense.
Are we gonna go through each one of these?
No, are there any that stand out to you as being inappropriate? I think those are the ones we need to talk about. I don't think we need to go through line item, every single one.
Just the one that I saw was where it was talking about number 12, and it says contractors' yards are not permitted use in B1, B2, or B3, but it's saying proposed to change it to B2 or B3. But then if that's still not allowed in B2 or B3, why would we change it there instead of going to industrial or?
Well, because you don't want to zone it just for the business that's currently there.
Okay.
Now, what would happen, Mr. Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong, it would become a legal non-conforming use, meaning that they can continue to use it as a contractor's yard. And I don't know how this got approved, but they would be able to continue its use, but should it burn down, should it go out of business, they would then not be able to restart it as a contractor's yard.
Okay.
They would then have to change to a business that would be conforming to the new zoning district.
Okay. Thank you.
If we're not going through them one by one, why are we given a choice then?
Well, some of
B2 or
them
B3?
we will have to.
Okay.
Ms. Bremer, at this point, I just want a discussion. If you guys have any thoughts or concerns about this, is going to be an ongoing process. I doubt it'll be finished before the winter is out.
I'm looking for tonight so we can kind of, is there anything on here that you're like, that doesn't make sense at all, that we make that change, it should stay like it is, or it should be changed to something else? That's kind of what we're looking at tonight. Because this is obviously going to then tie back into the map that we're going to have a public hearing on to approve as well, so.
I should also point out that there is some interplay going on with what Mr. Johnson is working on with the table of uses. I'm hoping that what Mr. Johnson has presented to you as an alternative change for the table of uses would be easier to understand, but I also think it will promote the ease of understanding of what's permitted in each district and what's not permitted in each district. So, of course, my proposals are based on the current table of uses. So I don't want to make any changes right now, because under what Mr. Johnson is proposing to you and what you guys will eventually make a recommendation to, I think it will make it easier to understand moving forward what changes might be necessary for the zoning map.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's more important that we understand what uses are allowed in what zones and which uses are not. And then when you look at the map and the properties, you have a better sense of, well, this list of uses for the B2 zone really isn't appropriate for this location. It's better that it's a B3 or something. And you'll have a better sense of where to put the pieces on the map once we agree on what the pieces are by zoning district. So this is a good start, but the uses that Mr. Womack has given us, they need to be looked at in context of what uses are permitted in the B2 and B3 zone that we're going to look at tonight.
Okay, I thought that was what we were supposed to be ready to discuss tonight.
We are discussing that tonight, yes.
I mean, we were supposed to compare what was there and how we thought it should be changed, and now we're not talking about it.
We're getting there.
I put in a lot of homework for nothing.
No, you didn't. No, you did not.
We're just not at that spot yet, but we're getting there. Okay, so, how do you want to do your proposed changes here? Do you want us to just walk us through some of these things? I know there's some spots in here where you have question marks, like, should we have this in here? Or,
Sure.
so,
Yeah, I'll walk you through this. There's a lot here. We discussed this several months ago, and your preference was, let's come up with a different format for the list of uses. Rather than have it in a chart, we would do it by zoning district. And there's two schools of thought on that. Is if I come to your community and I want to know where restaurants are allowed, I may go to your chart and find out restaurants are allowed in these different zoning districts. On the other hand, if I own a piece of property and I know what the zoning is, I want to find out what uses are allowed there. All the uses. Well, if it's a chart, it takes me a long time to get through that chart to find out what my property can be used for. This format allows that to be found easier. And people have different opinions on it. I've always favored this type of format, and your feedback told me that that's what you wanted me to do too. So that's what I've given you, and it serves two purposes. It creates a new format and allows us to come up with maybe different land uses that should be allowed in that zone, take a look at the uses that are permitted today and question those, and also to insert uses that are actually existing in those zoning districts and put them in the as allowed uses in that zone, or special uses, so they're not non-conforming. Now, going one step further, and that is, we'll probably go through all the uses by each zoning district, and there's 6 or 8 more districts to go through. Once we reach a consensus on that, my suggestion is let's also take a look at all the different standards that are in different sections of the ordinance for specific uses, and review those. And for instance, churches are allowed in all residential zones and in all the commercial zones I've given you this evening. Well, it takes the reader to whatever section that is, and if you go to those standards for churches, the first thing that jumps out at you is a church needs 2 acres and 200 feet or 150 feet of road frontage. Well, that means if I want to start a church downtown in an empty storefront, I can't do it. Okay, so the message isn't going to be heard in downtown Cedar Springs. They're going to have to go somewhere where they can find 2 acres, which would be pretty difficult to do in a city with limited land. So those are the kind of standards we want to go back and look at, and a lot of those standards were put into place back in the 70s and 80s, and they may not fit the current, what I would say, development-friendly attitude that we have in the city. That may be a deterrent to somebody that wants to start a new business or do some land use development. So we need to go through those, and believe me, that will take some time. to do that, because there's 50 or 60 different uses that have different regulations. But it'd be worth it, because you'll come out of there with, I think, more developer-friendly and citizen-friendly set of regulations that fit your current attitude. And some of those are simply archaic and don't work anymore. The church is one of the examples I just gave you. That's a good standard to have if you live in a township, but you don't. You have a city, so you can't find souvenirs. So we're going to have to go through those just to make sure that it fits current trends. So this is just the first step on a journey. We'll get through it. Okay, so I'll give you 3 zoning chapters tonight. The first one is the B2 Central Business District right downtown. And you've got your zoning map in front of you so you can see what geographic area that covers. I kept the purpose section, everything in bold is new language, or it's kind of been rephrased a little bit. The first one is just a rephrasing of your current language that says commercial uses over or under 10,000 square feet of gross floor area are allowed in the B2 zone as a special land use. Okay, so that means a lot, okay? Because every use in a retail sense is either in a building that's over 10,000 square feet or it's under 10,000 square feet. So virtually every retail use in downtown needs a special use permit. That's not how we do business here. There's another section in the code that lists retail establishments that don't need a special use, so the ordinance contradicts itself. So, yeah, item A just simply says what happens today, and that is generally recognized retail businesses are a permitted use. Same thing with personal service establishments. They're not even called out in the B2 zone. It's not listed there. That is that type of use. So we added that. Offices, banks and credit unions, but not including those with drive-through facilities. Health and fitness is allowed. We added martial arts and boxing schools. Maybe boxing schools isn't the right term, but those kind of things kind of spring up today. We added offices and showrooms of plumbers, electricians, decorators, or other similar trades, which you do find in downtowns, and that's just a walk-in place for interior decorators, or I'm selling faucets or things like that. And then commercial schools, you find that in the downtown. Item H, restaurants, coffee shops, bakeries, and similar retail food establishments, including those with walk-up window service, think corner bar. But not including drive-in restaurants. And then there's some other language about your current ordinances, and not permitting dancing, live entertainment, or the consumption of alcoholic beverages on the premises. So you can't have that in the B2 zone, although the brew pub certainly meets that definition. So we may have to work with that. And then the rest of the outdoor dining, I've used that in other ordinances. I didn't know if you have a similar regulation for outdoor dining.
We do, and it would contradict this, but it's good because the one we currently have needs to be changed.
So you want to leave this in here and change the other one? Or?
Yeah, I think that's probably the smart thing to
They
do.
shouldn't contradict each other. Brew pubs, farm market. I have a definition under the mixed use chapter, which we'll get to, but I had a question. Do we want to have farm markets in B2 zone? We can kind of come back to that when we talk about farm markets. And then medical and dental offices are allowed. I added optical or veterinary offices and clinics. Any questions on that first page? I don't want to go so fast that you can't keep up with me, but Mrs. Bremer, if you have any, just jump in any time if you have a question. Okay. Second page, we added some things like governmental office buildings, which is where we're standing today, institutional uses, catering, video gaming, and then the next one, dwelling units located above a non-residential use. Current ordinance it refers to it as accessory apartments. And then in my handout on the last page, I gave you the current regulations for accessory apartments, which really don't fit very well. If someone wants to put a apartment above a storefront downtown, these accessory apartment regulations really don't fit very well. Yes?
The only concern I have is that they have sufficient place for their animals to relieve themselves on their own property. We have a problem with that downtown.
Well, okay.
Just throwing that out there.
That's a human behavior and animalistic behavior requirement, but I'm not sure how we write that into the zoning code. rent an apartment, and the zoning code would have to have some language in there that would say, animals must prove to the zoning administrator you have somewhere to take your animal, to do their daily business. Or that would be that should be a citywide ordinance about, and maybe you have that, about cleaning up after your animal. That may already be in the code somewhere. I don't know.
It is currently in the code, but of course, Mrs. Brummer's point is well taken. I wish I could legislate that, but I think it would be virtually impossible to.
We have apartments being rented above the stores, and people just bring their animals down, and you find it on the sidewalk and on other people's property, and they don't clean it up. Maybe we should go after the rental.
Yeah, well, with the new code enforcement officer on board, we're certainly cracking down on stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's probably better handled through a city nuisance ordinance rather than zoning code. So, rather than call these accessory apartments, and I come up with just simply calling them dwelling units above non-residential uses, and then some of the regulations would be, can't be on the ground floor. Each dwelling shall contain a minimum of either 400 or 600, or whatever square footage you think is best. And under the current ordinance, a one-bedroom apartment as an accessory would have to have 600 square feet. Two-bedroom would have to have 800 square feet. I really don't know what kind of apartments are being carved out above the storefronts downtown, and whether those square footages are too much or too little. So we may need a little bit more information on that. But some minimum dwelling unit size should be in the zoning ordinance. One parking space provided for each bedroom, and the spaces would be provided as follows: either on the site itself, in the city of Cedar Springs operated parking lot that's approved by the city council, or the off-street space or spaces may be within 300 feet of the dwelling unit served. So jumping ahead, this would be a permitted use, and they would only have to get a permit from the zoning administrator to establish an apartment above a storefront.
Do you think 2 parking spaces would be too much? Because normally people have 2 cars.
Well, you could do that. For a single-family house, it's 2 per dwelling unit. This is just 1 parking space for each bedroom. So that's a requirement. If they needed 2 spaces, I guess the owner or the renter would try to find 2 spaces. If it was a married couple that had 1 bedroom, or a couple of roommates that had 2 cars, they'd have to find a space for that. We would only require 1 space. They'd have to prove it to us. I think the biggest problem is just finding a space for them to park without taking up retailers' parking spaces. Now, they may park there, and we can't catch them, but in order to get a permit to build or occupy that, they would have to prove to the zoning administrator that they have this parking space. And that's a change, because accessory apartments right now are special use permit, which is a public hearing and a site plan. But when you get right down to it, what is there for you to review? Very little. As long as they meet these measurable standards, if they can prove where the access door is, they get a building permit, if it meets the right size, and they can find a parking spot, let's get out of their way and let them do that. They just need a permit from the zoning administrator. Otherwise, it's a 30-day or 45-day public hearing, and it just takes longer to get the permit. So it really is, I think the best way to handle this is just meet these measurable standards and get a building permit and a permit from the zoning administrator for parking, and you can build an apartment up above the storefront. Any questions on that? The rest of that page are uses that are already permitted in the B2 zone. Item S at the bottom, conversion of single-family dwellings to a commercial or other non-residential use. We originally put that in the mixed-use zone, and we also at the same time added to the B2 zone. And that would work pretty well for houses that front on 2nd Street or 1st Street that are part of the downtown business district. So that would cover those kinds of uses. And then page 3, we again just kind of repeated uses that you already have downtown. Under special land uses, item A, banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions with drive-through facilities. That is currently a special use in the downtown. I put in italics, you want to consider other drive-up window type uses along with banks, pharmacies, or fast food restaurants of any kind as a special use downtown, or you just want to limit it to financial institutions?
As long as it's a special land use that we can look at, if we can allow it.
We had a conversation when the library was being built about cuts in, driveways and so forth. Wouldn't that be a problem?
Well, that's in a B3 zone, I think, right?
I think it's, in the B3 zone.
It's north of Maple Street, so just outside where those driving uses were permitted by special use. So,
And then if we had more of them downtown.
yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's not, you don't usually find it in the downtown, drive-through uses. Again, the downtown goes through the whole block, so they could come out on the First Street or Second Street, depending on what side of Main you're on. And they could face on toward the commercial, toward the residential side of the street there. So,
Now, this is just my opinion as part of the discussion, but the two properties across the street might make a good location for a drive-through pharmacy. I'm not sure a drive-through restaurant would be appropriate for the downtown, but a lower impact use like a bank or like a pharmacy might be appropriate. But that is a call for planning commission.
Exactly, because we want the foot traffic to come through downtown. And if you start allowing these fast food joints, and then foot traffic's gonna dry up because there's too much coming in and out. So a bank or a pharmacy where it's a low impact, that's not too bad.
yeah, I get your point there. You're not going to get McDonald's or Burger King or Arby's to come down here, they don't have enough room. But you may have a local pizza place or a sub shop or a drive-up cleaners that just simply wants a drive-up window. And if they're in the right location and the traffic works, then you may want to allow that. So that's the other side of that coin. And if it's a special use, you can kind of decide whether it fits or it doesn't fit. So it's really your call whether you think that's something you want to expand beyond banks, or do you want to just limit it to non-food establishments, which tend to be a little bit busier.
I like expanding it and having it a special land use that we have to look at.
All uses, all retail. Anybody else? Agree with that?
All right, okay, I get to look at it, that's fine.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so we'll add that. All right. Item B, restaurants and other retail food establishments which permit the consumption of alcoholic beverages on the premises, or which permit dancing or live entertainment. You want to allow that, I put a note there, should that be a special use or a permitted use? Because brew pubs are allowed as a permitted use, but is there a difference between a brew pub, Cedar Springs Brewery, and a nice sit-down restaurant downtown that serves alcohol by the glass? They're not even, I don't think, well, I would say that, I think they're permitted downtown. It doesn't come right out and jump at you. It just says, one of them says you can't have alcohol, and the other one says you can just have serve beverages. So I'm taking that to mean that you could have a restaurant serving beverages, but let's say what kind of beverages, it would still be a permitted use downtown. I think that answered itself. I didn't realize that until I started looking at this evening. So if we go back to permitted uses, you'd almost want to change H where it says restaurants, coffee shops, and just take out the word not permitting alcoholic beverages, because they really do allow that downtown. So I don't know if it makes any difference to make a distinction between any restaurant, just any restaurant serving beverages, without specifying whether it's alcohol or not, because it's really kind of an accepted way of doing business. So I was going to say, don't make that distinction unless you really want to. And I don't know if it makes any difference whether you want to make a distinction whether the restaurant has dancing or not. Anybody here respond to that? Any Arthur Murray graduates here?
Married to former dancers that probably are not going to let
Or you just want to just kind of restaurant serving beverages and not make that distinction between dancing and alcohol beverages?
Right.
Item C, that was put in here not last year, I think. We put this in mixed-use zone. And looking at it again in the downtown zone, it says establishments which produce alcoholic beverages primarily for distribution off-site. That's more of a brewery that cans their beverage and then sells it. So I think, in retrospect, that's not the kind of thing that we really want to go downtown anyway. And I would say that really should be in the industrial zone.
Oh, that's what the micro cannery does.
They just made the machinery.
Yeah, they produce the machine that then does the canning. They don't do the canning there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my bad. They're doing brewery, so. Yeah, this one we put in the mixed-use zone as an encouragement for business, and that there in the downtown, it doesn't really fit. And so I think you should take that out. And then on page 4, we expanded the definition of indoor commercial recreation facilities as a special use. We added hotels and motels, gas station, convenience stores with or without restaurants, because you do have one down here in the corner of Muskegon and South Main. And it's not listed in the B2 zone. And then production on item N, production of merchandise on the premises, provided that not more than 15 persons are employed. I took out the 15 persons. I think we had that discussion before. It doesn't really make any sense. 15 is not a magic number that I know of. And then the last 3 items, we took out accessory apartments, as you know. Boarding houses is kind of an antiquated term. And then multiple family dwellings. Should that be in the downtown zone? I didn't. So we took that out as well. So that's the list of new uses in the B2 zone. It's expanded, it allows, it's quite an expansion of what you had, and you really get to see everything at a glance.
Did we decide no dancing?
No dancing. Well, we're not going to mention it. So the city has a separate entertainment permit, or some cities do, which allows for bands or dancing, and then we could be regulated under that.
We don't currently, but we might in the future. But, Mr. Johnson, just to clarify, so what you're saying is we would remove the conditions of dancing and alcoholic beverages from restaurants so that the zoning administrator or the planning commission could review each restaurant without regard to dancing or alcoholic beverages.
Right. Yeah, we would not use those terms in the listed uses. There would be no distinction between a restaurant. It would just be a restaurant serving beverages and food for consumption on the premises. Any questions on B2? All right. B3 won't take quite as long to get through. And you can see where that is on your map. That's north of Maple Street, basically to the city limits. And then along West Maple, west of over to 5th Street. So the uses there would be anything allowed in the B2 zone by permitted use would also be allowed in that zoning district. Gas stations, convenience stores with or without restaurants would be a permitted use. Now the next one, banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions with drive-through facilities would be a permitted use. And I put a note in there, do you also want to allow drive-in restaurants and other drive-through facilities without a special use in that zoning district.
I think that should be special land use as well,
I do too.
just to be consistent.
All drive-in businesses, that would be a special land use?
It seems like we've had a discussion before because drive-ins having the kind of dicey requirements about having ways in and ways out that are safe, and that we've always wanted to see drive-ins come before us.
You would as a site plan for sure, but this gives you a little bit extra layer of discretion. You could approve it or not approve it or put more conditions on it. So let's take C and we'll move that to the special land use list.
Thank you.
Restaurants and other retail food establishment, we would change that to we wouldn't even have to list that because it would be permitted use in the B2 zone. So we wouldn't have to list that there. And that's about it. So really the only distinction there is that gas stations and convenience stores, with or without restaurants, would not be a special use, but they would be a permitted use. So that's use is permitted. So it isn't that much different than the B2 zone. The major difference then between the zoning district would be the special land uses that are allowed in B3, but are not allowed in, that are above and beyond the B2 zone. So on page 1 there, special land uses permitted in the B2 zone would also be permitted in B3. Open air businesses, and I've kind of expanded what that means there. Anything really that's sold outside. Boats, motor vehicles, farm implements, yard decorations, nursery stocks, storage buildings, recreational vehicles, mobile and modular homes, those would all require a special use permit. C and D are currently allowed in that district. So is E, automobile repair establishments. And then the next page, pet boarding is allowed, hospitals are allowed, mortuaries and funeral homes. And then I added outdoor commercial recreation establishments such as miniature golf, go-karts, driving ranges, batting cages, athletic fields, ambulance service establishments, automatic and self-serve vehicle wash, and mini warehouse and self-storage. You often find those on major streets.
No amusement parks?
Well, I cross those out. Drive-in theaters, do you really want one? Downtown, do you really want an amusement park? How about a golf course within the city limits? You need 40 acres, so it goes half the town. Public or private schools or colleges, you can't regulate public schools anyhow. They get to go where they want to go. And we already have private schools listed as permitted uses. And the last one, this is allowed, I think, in downtown and B2 and B3. Outdoor storage is either the principal or accessory use. My recommendation is you don't want that as a principal use, simply an outdoor storage lot. But I think we might want to keep it as outdoor storage as an accessory use. And I think we have regulations in there about outdoor storage in any zone has to be screened. So I'll double check that, but I don't think you want to allow that as a principal use. It just doesn't fit. Any comments on B3? This is not your last chance to leave. Okay. Mixed use. We updated this last year, so most of the uses are not in bold. I did add personal service establishments, which is allowed in B2. I think you could see those springing up as in a conversion of a house or something, or just service establishments are allowed. And then restaurants and coffee shops, we would change that to match the B2 zone. And G really kind of combines H and I, restaurants, serving food and drink without alcoholic beverages, so it's really kind of the same as the B2 zone. And then farm market as defined herein, so if you go to the last page of this handout, where we define a farm market, and I used the terms farm market, farm product, and farm from the Michigan Department of Agricultural and Rural Development. They have a farm market GAMS set of regulations, generally accepted agricultural management practices. So we're in a city, so we don't allow farming. Okay? But we want to have a farm market, so how do you define that? And we can define that really, if you want to be able to sell farm products, then I provided you two definitions, what a farm market is according to the state farm market regulations. At least 50% of the total square footage used to display all your products have to be farm products. And then there's a definition of what a farm product is. And then the other 50% can be washing machines, computers, used cars, can be whatever you want. But if farm markets are allowed in the downtown zone, B2, and in the mixed-use zone, well then what is a farm market? We all think we know what it is. Brings up nice images, and we've got a couple nice ones in Grand Rapids, and Mr. Womack and I took a tour of that a couple weeks ago as part of the MAP and MML conference. That's what people think a farm market is the one with vendors pull up. So if you want to have that in Cedar Springs, then they would have to meet this definition. So are you comfortable with that?
So residents who maybe grow vegetables, they couldn't take it to a farm market? It has to be someone whose products are produced on a farm and sold? I mean, that's how they make their living?
That's what the definition of a farm is, but a farm market would simply be a place, area, or buildings from which farm products are sold. Okay, so it could be, and those are allowed in the B2 zone and the mixed-use zone. So that wouldn't cover somebody that grows too many zucchinis and puts a table out in front of their house and wants to sell them for 50 cents a piece. They wouldn't fall into that.
Our farm market that we have here, are those all farmers that bring things in?
No, that's a separate ordinance. So that is covered by a separate farmer's market ordinance, which is specifically designed for that.
All right.
So this is a totally separate thing, which is zoning related.
Was this getting away with that? Because I'm not familiar with that ordinance, but...
No, and I was trying to reconcile the thing because I know of at least one business person who's interested in opening a permanent farmer's market similar to what we saw down in Grand Rapids.
Right.
So I'm glad that you're adding this language in. I think actually it would just give you two avenues of approach versus making them conflict.
The one that, is that a city, on city property that the city authorizes or allows?
Yep, so the current ordinance allows any business who wants to organize one to have a temporary but ongoing farmer's market wherever they want it, but it has to be in, I think, the MU or B2 or B3 districts.
Okay.
Whereas this seems to be focused more on a permanent, ongoing market versus one that has to be licensed through the city. This would be more of a business versus a temporary situation.
So would we want, just to make sure there's a distinction, if we put farm market in here, we want to say, except those authorized by ordinance number
Yeah, that's
so-and-so?
probably.
So, yeah, we should make some distinction there. Okay, we can find out what that ordinance number is to put that in there. Let's see. Medical and dental offices and clinics, it's currently a special land use in the mixed-use zone. I moved it over to a use permitted by right. I didn't see why we want to make that a special use. We added professional business offices. Then under special land uses, we added the dwelling units located above non-resident uses, just like in the B2 zone. Again, that would be just a permitted use. Bed and breakfast is there now. Multiple family dwellings, I put a note there about, do we want to limit the size of those units to 4, 6, 8, or 12? Because right now there is no limit. But if somebody came in and bought a whole block, they can put up a 36-unit apartment building, which may seem out of place. So I just kind of throw that out to allow somebody to put a 4-plex or 6-plex building. Maybe you can limit the number. Maybe 4 is the right number. So it kind of fits into the neighborhood than something really large. It doesn't fit. So, any ideas on what
Four
size you
sounds good.
prefer?
Yeah,
Four
Um,
sounds good.
I like a 4.
I'm good with 4 or 6, but I would not go much higher than that. I'm trying to think of square foot of an average living space multiplied by how large would the building have to be to accommodate if you had X number of cars inside. I'm thinking, okay, 6. Off the top of my head, I probably have to think about this a little bit more, but I'm looking at the overall size of the building compared to the otherwise mostly residential kind of housing that would be in mixed-use area. And I wouldn't want it to be much larger than that or the that size.
Yeah, I think either 4 or 6, I think, is the right size that you want to see, so we'll go with 4. Item E really should have been crossed out, commercial uses over or under 10,000 square feet. And that's really replaced by F, which is retail businesses not exceeding 10,000 square feet. So that's my way of saying we don't want really large retail buildings in this zoning district. A 10,000 square foot building is only 100 by 100. It's not that big. But again, think of the geographic area where this is going and what's already there. And you may want to consider limiting the size of the building to something that fits, just like we did for apartments, something a little smaller scale, because you still allow single-family homes, and there's still a bunch of them in that zoning district.
Right.
So it makes some sense to limit the retail businesses. Other things that are already listed, they're already there. On next page, we had trade schools, we expanded that a little bit. And then last year we added things like building contractors for K&A painters, just because they wanted to move in out there. We added things last year by machine shop, tool and die establishments, indoor recreational establishments. And then when you get down to the bottom of the page there where it says item Y, light industrial uses, provided warehousing and trucking activities. To me that's kind of vague to say light industrial uses. We've already established what those uses are above that by machine shop, tool and die establishments, things like brew pubs or, not brew pubs, but establishments producing alcoholic beverages. So we do allow some industrial uses, but we name them. So if you didn't name them, light industrial uses, that really opens the door to something that you have no idea what's going to walk through that door.
Mr. Johnson, could I jump in here for a second? Because this is an ideal place for the kind of interplay between what we were talking about today.
Oh.
So, as you mentioned by name, the K&A painting that, I think that's Ash Street.
Yes.
Part of my recommendation for changes on the zoning map would be that section of Ash Street to the west, near the White Pine Trail, where there's a number of industrial type buildings, that might be better to just rezone that little section of land and not include those uses in the MU district at large. Because if you knock over one of these single-family homes that's in a MU district and they put up a light industrial factory there instead, I think you'd have a lot of people who are very upset with that. But the section on Ash Street's already defined.
Yeah.
So it might be better to carve that out as a industrial section or more intense B2, B3, versus having these uses permitted in the MU district.
I think that's a good point, but because if you look at the MU zone, it really allows just about everything that you can think of. And if you go back to the purpose, this was put into place a number of years ago, it talks about to permit a creative use of residential, office, commercial, and professional service land uses, and then it says limited light industrial uses are also permitted, but not intended to become a dominant use. So, we may want to look at where we draw the lines, and does it make sense